Agatha Raisin and the excessively polite Vicar. Agatha Raisin's village fundraiser was meant to restore order, until pride, secrets, and a cup of tea turned deadly. In Carsley, goodwill is rarely innocent, and humiliation is only the beginning. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Doris, if you tilt that table one more time, I shall personally nail it to the floor, Agatha snapped, sweeping into the WI hall with the air of a woman who had already saved the village twice before breakfast. She marched down the centre aisle between wobbling trestle tables, each covered in cloths that Doris Simpson had ironed until her wrists ached. "I'm only trying to line them up, Mrs. Raisin," Doris murmured, edging backward like someone avoiding a skittish horse. "Line them up by sight, not by instinct," Agatha said, shoving one end 3 inches to the left. "Honestly, the entire fate of the church roof rests on visual symmetry, and you're treating it like a barn dance." Mrs. Bloxby approached with a gentle smile that suggested nothing in life was worth fretting about, not even Agatha's temper. "It will all come together beautifully," she said. "People are eager to support the fundraiser." "They're eager to see who embarrasses themselves first," Agatha replied, "and I refuse to give them the satisfaction." The WI hall smelled faintly of polish and fruitcake, though Agatha had banned anything resembling sponge until she had approved its presentation. The harsh strip lights hummed, the trestle tables wobbled, and Agatha presided like a small but formidable empress preparing for coronation. Brenda Swithins bustled forward, clutching a clipboard. "Agatha, I must insist the hymn sheets go on the inner tables. The vicar prefers not to make decisions," Agatha said, "and I prefer people seeing the cakes first. It encourages donations." Brenda's nostrils flared. "This is a Grace and Gatto evening, not an eating contest." "Speak for yourself," Agatha muttered. Before Brenda could retort, the hall doors clattered open and Lionel Pargeter strode in as though entering his private club. He was large in the manner of men who had grown accustomed to occupying entire rooms. His cufflinks gleamed, and his smile was broad enough to signal both welcome and warning. "My dear people," Lionel boomed, "what a sight! Real village spirit, marvellous." Agatha stiffened. She had met Lionel only once before. At a parish committee meeting he had derailed by bragging about his latest acquisition, a fleet of delivery vans embossed with his own face. Mr. Bloxby hurried after him, pale and fluttering. "So kind of you to visit, Mr. Pargeter. We are most grateful, truly most grateful, for your support." Lionel waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense, Vicar. Happy to elevate matters. Someone's got to bring Carsley into the modern age." Agatha bristled. The modern age could stay in London for all she cared. Tamsin Pargeter followed her husband at a careful distance, elegant, contained, and dressed in the sort of tasteful beige London women wore to prove they were above frivolity. She nodded at Agatha with polite interest, though her eyes gave nothing away. Colin Briggs, the organist, lurked by the refreshment table, muttering about acoustics. Terry Jenkins, the local builder, hovered near Lionel with the hopeful expression of a man imagining lucrative renovation contracts. Young curate Daniel Webb stood beside the stage, wringing his hands as if apologizing to God in advance for whatever the evening might bring. Agatha cleared her throat. "If everyone would kindly stand behind their assigned stations—" "Oh," Lionel thundered, pointing. "Is that your cake, Mrs. Raisin? Splendid height, very professional, almost too professional." Agatha's spine snapped straight. The cake, a towering chocolate torte with glossy curls, had been bought early that morning from an Evesham baker whose discretion cost extra. She had intended to pass it off as homemade with a simple flourish of powdered sugar. Lionel bent, lifted the tablecloth and produced the baker's cardboard box with triumphant glee. "Well, well, what have we here?" A ripple ran through the hall. Brenda's delighted gasp could have powered the lights. Doris froze mid-step. Mrs. Bloxby pressed her lips together in a sympathetic line. "It's merely packaging," Agatha said sharply. "One reuses things. Environmental responsibility." "Of course," Lionel said, grinning. "Nothing says homemade like a shop label. Capital stuff." Laughter broke out, the small, mean-spirited village kind that came from people grateful it wasn't their humiliation being served with cream. Agatha felt heat rise through her chest. Her humiliation was complete, neat as a ribboned parcel. Still, the fundraiser went ahead with surprising enthusiasm. Villagers crowded the tables, tossing coins into donation tins. Colin played a modest organ selection. Brenda dispensed hymn sheets with military precision. Doris spilled jam twice and nearly fainted with apology. Agatha stalked between tables, pretending not to notice the whispers trailing behind her like mischievous children. She caught Mr. Blocksby thanking Lionel so effusively that even Tamsin looked faintly alarmed. "Do stop grovelling," Agatha hissed at the vicar as she passed. "He's only a man, not the Archbishop of Canterbury." Mr. Blocksby reddened. "It's important to show gratitude. He has been very generous." "He's been very insufferable," Agatha replied. Near the raffle table, Terry cornered Lionel. "About that church extension we discussed. I could have drawings ready by Wednesday." Yes, later," Lionel said, brushing him aside with the ease of a man batting away midges. Daniel approached with quiet politeness. "Mr. Pargeter, would you like to see the vestry afterwards? There's talk bores me, Webb. Results matter." Daniel wilted like damp lettuce. As the evening reached its peak, Lionel clapped his hands for attention. "Wonderful turnout. Now, before we disperse, allow me to make a little announcement." Agatha stiffened. Announcements were her terrain. Lionel strode to the front, puffed up with importance. "This roof appeal of ours is only the beginning. I propose we modernise the entire church. Glass vestibule, new sound system, remove those dreadful pews. Think progress. And naturally, I shall spearhead the funding." Gasps fluttered around the hall. Colin looked as though he might faint. Brenda beamed like a woman receiving a Christmas miracle she had ordered herself. Terry rubbed his hands. Daniel blinked repeatedly, perhaps hoping someone else would object first. Mr. Blocksby bowed his head in a gesture so humble it verged on tragic. "Your generosity overwhelms us, Mr. Pargeter. Truly, we cannot thank you enough." Agatha glared at the vicar. The man had backbone only when deciding biscuit flavours for the church fete. Mrs. Blocksby caught Agatha's eye from across the hall. Her expression was gentle but weighted. Something was amiss, and Lionel's involvement promised trouble. As villagers began clearing plates and stacking chairs, Agatha walked stiffly to the cake table and boxed up her tort with unnecessary force. Doris hovered. "It really did look homemade, Mrs. Raisin." "Thank you, Doris," Agatha said tightly. "Next time I'll rub flour on my face for authenticity." She swept out of the hall before Brenda could offer a parting jab. Outside, cool night air brushed her face, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from nearby cottages. The hum of laughter drifted from the hall. At her expense, she was sure. "I'll show them," she muttered. "I'll show all of them." At home, Hodge lounged on her armchair like a furry emperor. He blinked slowly as she entered, unimpressed by her torment. "Oh, hush," she said, dropping her handbag. "You'd hide a shop-bought cake too if you had opposable thumbs." Hodge stretched, yawned, and flicked his tail in sage dismissal. Agatha poured herself a modest splash of wine, one she absolutely had not earned, and stared into the quiet cottage. The fundraiser was a success, yet Carsley had gained a benefactor who treated them all like serfs, and Agatha had gained a humiliation that would echo through the village for weeks. "Well," she muttered, switching on the kettle, "the man hasn't seen the last of me." The kettle sighed, Hodge settled deeper into the chair, and Agatha Raisin, pride bruised, temper sharpened, felt the first faint prickle that trouble had only just begun. "Hodge, stop looking smug. I refuse to be mocked by a cat," Agatha declared, pacing her sitting room while Hodge washed a paw with exaggerated delicacy. The previous night's humiliation still pulsed behind her eyes. She jabbed at the telephone, muttering about village ingrates before Roy Silver's bright London voice burst through the receiver. "Darling Aggie, you sound like someone stole your mascara." "Worse," Agatha snapped. "A vulgar plutocrat exposed my cake." Roy gave a delighted gasp. "Tell me everything slowly. I want flavour. I might pitch a feature on village philanthropy gone wrong, perfect for an urban readership craving rural disaster." Agatha straightened, vanity stirring. "It was sabotage, Roy. That man, Lionel Pargeter, humiliated me in front of the entire WI." "Lean in, sweetheart," Roy urged. "You make sure you're the centre of whatever drama is brewing. Readers adore you." "I'm not performing," Agatha insisted. "I'm furious." "And yet," Roy sang, "you will rise triumphant, like a phoenix emerging from sponge crumbs." She slammed the receiver down harder than necessary, but her pride felt slightly soothed. If Roy saw narrative potential, then at least her humiliation had cultural value. The next day, Agatha marched into the church vestry with the clipped stride of a woman ready to seize back control. The small room, lit by a bar of pale sunshine, felt colder than it needed to be. Lionel Pargeter occupied the centre like a general surveying inferior troops. "We'll need microphones," he barked. "Proper ones, not those tinny things." Colin Briggs, the organist, stiffened. "This is a church, not a nightclub." Lionel ignored him. "Modern music too. Something with energy." Brenda Swithins drew herself up like a sentinel. "The parish has traditions." "Traditions bore visitors," Lionel cut in. "We want audiences." Terry Jenkins stepped forward smoothly. "I can price a new sound system, and glass lobby if needed." Lionel clapped him on the back with enough force to wind him. "Excellent initiative." Agatha watched the exchange, hands on hips. Lionel was collecting allies like a greedy child grabbing sweets. Tamsin Pargeter perched elegantly on a wooden chair, her gloved hands folded in her lap. She looked tranquil, aloof, and faintly resigned. Not once did her eyes linger on her husband for more than a second. Mr. Blocksby fluttered between everyone, smoothing edges. "Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Colin. Mr. Pargeter, so generous, so forward-thinking." Agatha cut in. "You don't have to thank him 15 times. Once will do." The vicar reddened. "Gratitude is important." "Servitude isn't," Agatha said quietly. Lionel turned to her with a smile both amused and predatory. "Mrs. Raisin, always spirited. We'll rely on you for event organisation then. You've got a reputation for flair." Agatha bristled. "I prefer competence." "Call it what you like," he said cheerfully. The meeting dissolved into raised voices. Colin threatened resigning if electric guitars ever crossed the threshold. Terry muttered about business timelines being strangled by dithering. Brenda declared that oversight was urgently needed before chaos replaces reverence. Agatha watched the room with sharpened awareness. Every person here disliked Lionel for a different reason, and he, oblivious, believed he was the hero. Mrs. Blocksby steered Agatha toward the vicarage kitchen after the vestry battle, a phrase Agatha decided she would use later when reporting to Roy. The kitchen was warm, the air carrying the scent of freshly baked scones. They sat at the scrubbed wooden table while the kettle puffed softly on the counter. Mrs. Blocksby poured tea. Lionel means well in his own fashion, but generosity from such men has strings. "More like ropes," Agatha said, "tightening around the parish." "He has been influencing smaller decisions already. Some parishioners resent it deeply." Agatha leaned forward. "Which ones?" Mrs. Blocksby shook her head. "I shouldn't say, but you may have noticed the tensions." Agatha certainly had. The entire village seemed ready to riot if Lionel breathed in the wrong direction. Mrs. Blocksby continued. "He's very particular about his tea. Herbal blend, 2 sweeteners, because of his tablets." She sighed. "Tamsin is careful about which jar she uses." At that moment, Tamsin herself stepped into the doorway. Her expression did not change, but a tiny flick of her eyes revealed annoyance at hearing Lionel's name. She fussed briefly with the jar labels before retreating silently. A clue, Agatha thought, though she could not yet name its significance. Later, Agatha strolled through the village, privately assessing motives. Colin's musical outrage felt theatrical but strong. Terry's ambitions looked suspiciously keen. Brenda's desire for oversight hinted at deep-rooted irritation. Everyone wanted Lionel to stop interfering. Everyone wanted something from him. At the Red Lion, clusters of villagers whispered around pints. A rumour drifted past Agatha that Colin had threatened Lionel during choir practice. Another rumour claimed Terry had been promised a contract and then left waiting. Still another suggested Brenda had discovered something inappropriate in parish paperwork and wanted Lionel reined in. Carsley had officially turned against its benefactor, though no one dared say so where Lionel could hear. As afternoon edged toward pale gold, Agatha returned toward the church. She spotted a fresh sheet pinned neatly to the porch notice board. The handwriting was bold, elegant, and self-congratulatory. Benefactor's Dessert Evening, hosted by Mr. and Mrs. Lionel Pargeter, co-host, Mrs. Agatha Raisin. Agatha stared at the words with disbelief. "I did not agree to co-host anything," she muttered, "and certainly not with him." Brenda appeared beside her like a vengeful ghost. Such an honour being named publicly. It's libel, Agatha snapped. Still, good publicity for the WI, Brenda said sweetly, assuming you can keep the cakes honest this time. Agatha marched away before she could say something Brenda would cherish for months. As she walked home, her thoughts churned. Lionel had enemies everywhere, in music, construction, parish politics, and domestic silence, and he enjoyed provoking all of them. A benefactor, yes, but one drawing resentment like a magnet. When she reached her cottage, Hodge sat in the window, tail twitching with the air of a creature unimpressed by human chaos. Inside, the cottage felt warm, familiar, and judgmental. She lit a cigarette and dragged hard, because fury always tasted like tobacco. "Don't give me that look," she told Hodge. "You weren't publicly shamed by a man with cufflinks the size of sugar lumps." Hodge blinked slowly. Agatha sighed and kicked off her shoes. A benefactor with enemies, she thought, and now she was tied to him by a poster she hadn't approved. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll go to the wretched dessert evening, and I'll be ready." The kettle clicked softly in the background. Hodge stretched, settling deeper into his cushion. Agatha stared into the cosy room, sensing trouble creeping closer on quiet feet. Trouble and opportunity. "Doris, that is not a swirl, it is a smear," Agatha barked as she swooped toward the dessert table. "Swirls must look intentional. Smears look like guilt." Doris blinked at her. "Sorry, Mrs. Raisin, it's the lemon tart." It slid. "Nothing in this hall slides unless I permit it," Agatha muttered, snatching a cloth. She wiped, rearranged, straightened, and glared at everything that dared to sit crooked. Tonight, she would not be humiliated by baked goods. The WI hall glowed under warm fairy lights hung by Doris and then rehung correctly by Agatha. Villagers, dressed in their best interpretations of smart casual, filled the room with chatter, perfume, and the faint rustle of anticipation. The tables looked magnificent, trifles glistening like jewels, tarts standing proudly, sponge cakes stacked with architectural precision. Agatha surveyed it all with a military general's grim satisfaction. She had supervised every dish, bullied the WI into 3 rehearsals, and smuggled in 1 Mercester patisserie to elevate the tone. "Continental flair," she had announced to Brenda, who sniffed but grudgingly approved. The door burst open and Lionel Pargeter strode in as though he owned the building, which he practically believed he did. His voice boomed across the hall. "Splendid turnout! Look at this! Carsley, rising at last!" Agatha clenched her jaw. He couldn't walk 3 steps without praising himself. Mr. Blocksby hovered behind him, bowing and murmuring thanks like an apologetic butler. "So generous, Mr. Pargeter. So kind. So forward-thinking." Lionel waved the vicar aside. "No need for grovelling, Blocksby. Your village deserves modern leadership, which luckily I provide." Agatha felt irritation prickle her arms. Colin Briggs approached, sheet music clutched to his chest. "Mr. Pargeter, I've prepared 3 short pieces for the evening." "Change of plans," Lionel interrupted cheerfully. "My nephew Gordon will perform instead. He's brought his keyboard." Colin froze, horrified. "Keyboard? In the WI hall?" "Exactly," Lionel said. "A touch of modernity." Colin marched off stiffly, muttering about sacrilege. Brenda Swithins stalked past Agatha. "I wasn't even consulted for introductions tonight." "You're lucky," Agatha said. "He'd only mispronounce your name." Terry Jenkins cornered Lionel near the raffle basket. "About that deposit." "Later," Lionel said, brushing him aside like an annoying wasp. Daniel the curate hovered nearby, pale and anxious, as though anticipating divine punishment. Through it all, Tamsin Pargeter glided with graceful efficiency, topping up glasses and smiling a serene, brittle smile. She never drifted far from Lionel, yet her eyes slid away whenever he addressed her. Agatha's irritation gave way to curiosity. The woman seemed to drift between duty and dread. Then Agatha saw it, Tamsin at the refreshment table preparing Lionel's herbal tea. Her hand hovered just a beat too long above the sweetener jar before she dropped 2 tablets inside. She stirred, smoothed the surface, and carried the mug toward Lionel with steady hands. Agatha frowned. Suspicion stirred. Lionel seized the mug. "About time," he said. "You know I need it before speaking." He slurped loudly. As guests settled, Gordon, the infamous nephew, launched into a keyboard solo, that resembled a cat arguing with a vacuum cleaner. Colin gaped in offended silence. Brenda sniffed loudly at every missed note. Terry retreated behind a pillar to hide his laughter. Agatha stood near the front, arms folded, ready to intercept any catastrophe. Lionel ascended the makeshift stage, mug still in hand, and puffed out his chest. "Ladies and gentlemen, Carsley owes me—" The hall fell silent. Lionel thrived. "A debt of gratitude. I've brought vision to this quaint parish. I've funded progress. I've shown you how modernization works. And soon, with my guidance, this village will—" He stopped. A flicker crossed his face. Annoyance first, then confusion. His voice thinned, his hand tightened around the mug. Agatha stepped forward instinctively. Lionel swayed, clutching his chest. The mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, splashing brown liquid across the stage. His knees buckled. He collapsed. For one suspended moment, the hall froze. Then the screams began. "Someone call an ambulance!" Brenda shrieked. Agatha dropped to her knees beside Lionel. "Don't you dare die here," she snapped, shaking his shoulder. "Not on my pastry table night." Lionel didn't respond. Tamsin, pale and too composed, stepped back. Daniel covered his mouth with trembling fingers. Terry swore under his breath. Colin crossed himself. Mr. Bloxby knelt opposite Agatha, murmuring gentle prayers with absurd softness, as if apologizing for disturbing Lionel's collapse. The ambulance arrived with frantic efficiency, pushing through startled villagers. A paramedic knelt, sniffed the broken cup, and frowned deeply. "There's a chemical taint here," she murmured. Agatha heard it. The room heard it. A strange, dreadful awareness swept through the hall like a cold draught. Within minutes, Lionel was lifted onto a stretcher. Agatha watched the paramedic's grim expressions and felt her stomach tighten. Minutes later, the certainty came. Lionel Pargeter was dead. It was nearly 10 when Bill Wong appeared at Agatha's cottage. Hodge was sprawled on the armchair, tail flicking irritably at the intrusion. Bill removed his hat, face weary but kind. "Agatha, I'm sorry. I know it's been a long night." She folded her arms. "How suspicious is it?" Bill sighed. "Suspicious enough. The paramedics flagged the smell, and his medical tablets could react badly with certain compounds. We need toxicology, but it doesn't look natural." Agatha's pulse quickened. "You think someone tampered with his drink?" "I think," Bill said carefully, "that the last person near his cup was very close to him." He paused. "Agatha, that might include you." She gasped. "Me? Bill Wong, I have never tampered with herbal tea. I don't even drink the stuff." "I know," he said gently, "but you were beside the refreshment table." Agatha drew herself up. "If I were going to murder someone, I'd hardly choose dessert night." Bill gave a tired smile. "I need a full statement. You were closest to him when he fell." A mix of flattery, fear, and indignation tangled inside her. She sat straighter. "Fine. I'll tell you everything. But if you think I'm the culprit, you can think again." "I don't," Bill said. "But procedure is procedure." Agatha recounted the evening, the arguments, the speeches, the tea. She almost mentioned Tamsin's lingering hand over the sweeteners, but something held her back. Not protection, not suspicion either, just instinct. When she finished, Bill closed his notebook. "We may need more later. And Agatha, stay out of trouble." "I am not trouble," she snapped. "You often walk next to it," Bill murmured. With that, he left. Agatha locked the door, shoulders slumping. Her cottage felt small, dim, and unsettlingly quiet. Hodge stretched, yawned, and gave her a glance that suggested the evening had been predictable all along. "Well," Agatha muttered, sinking into the armchair beside him, "I did want excitement." Hodge curled his tail closer. Agatha sighed as the kettle clicked softly in the kitchen, the sound of ordinary life continuing despite murder, scandal, and pastries gone wrong. And she knew with a familiar spark that she was now firmly inside the mystery, whether she liked it or not. "Bill Wong, you are wasting time," Agatha announced, bursting through the church's side door with the force of a minor weather event, "and I am here to help." Bill looked up from a table strewn with papers. "Good morning to you too, Agatha." She ignored the greeting. The vestry had been transformed into a makeshift incident room, complete with files, mugs, and a glaring absence of authority she felt qualified to fill. Bill's superior, Inspector Jessup, stood by the window, arms folded and expression grim. Jessup eyed her. Mrs. Raisin, the church is currently a restricted area. Restricted to idiots? Agatha asked sweetly. Because Lionel's killer certainly wasn't one. Bill winced. Agatha, please, let us do our work. That's why I'm here, she said, to accelerate it. Jessup muttered, God help us, before stepping aside. Agatha planted herself next to Bill. Right, bring me up to speed. Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. Agatha, do not interfere. She smiled. Excellent. You desperately need me. Interviews began. Agatha hovered, eavesdropped, or later extracted details using the Carsley gossip network, which she believed more reliable than police procedure. Colin Briggs arrived first, still wounded from the keyboard debacle. His arms were folded tightly, sheet music sticking out of his coat pocket like a flag of martyrdom. I didn't poison anyone, he said before Jessup even started questioning. I merely expressed that electric keyboards are an affront to the sanctity of music. Bill kept his tone calm. But you argued with Mr. Pargeter. I argue with anyone threatening good taste, Colin snapped. If that were a crime, half the village would be in jail. Agatha leaned toward Bill. He's dramatic but harmless. Colin glared at her. I heard that, Mrs. Raisin. She waved him away. Next came Brenda Swithins, lips pursed, handbag clutched like ammunition. She sat with her back perfectly straight, ready to fend off accusations. Jessup said, You were near the refreshments, Mrs. Swithins. Brenda sniffed. I was overseeing standards. Somebody had to. The vicar lets anyone near the tea urn. Bill asked, Did you notice anything off about Mr. Pargeter's cup? His manners were off, Brenda said. His gratitude was off. His sense of importance was off. But his cup looked perfectly normal. Agatha whispered, She hates him enough for motive. Brenda turned sharply. I heard that too. Agatha didn't apologize. Brenda never deserved apologies. Terry Jenkins shuffled in next. His hair was rumpled, his eyes wary. Look, the man owed me money, he said. Doesn't mean I wanted him dead. Bill asked, How much money? Enough, Terry muttered. And he said he'd review the contract. That's builder speak for forget it. Jessup leaned forward. Where were you during dessert? Talking to a potential client outside. Name? Terry hesitated. Irrelevant. Agatha snorted. Which means invented. Terry glared. Mrs. Raisin, I don't answer to you. You should, Agatha replied. I'm far scarier than Jessup. Terry's jaw twitched, but he didn't deny it. Daniel the curate entered like a nervous sparrow. His hands trembled. His collar seemed too tight. Bill softened his tone. Daniel, walk us through the evening. Daniel swallowed. I was greeting people, then helping Tamsin pour drinks, then everything went wrong. Agatha narrowed her eyes. You look guilty of something. Daniel flushed. I'm not guilty, I'm anxious. Jessup scribbled a note. Why anxious? Daniel's voice cracked. Because this parish eats its own. Agatha considered him. Daniel was frightened, yes, but not of murder, of something personal. Then Tamsin Pargeter appeared, dressed in understated mourning black. She sat carefully, back straight, hands folded. Her beauty seemed muted tonight, as though grief had dimmed her colours. Bill spoke gently. Mrs. Pargeter, thank you for coming. She nodded. Lionel could be difficult, but he was generous. Agatha watched closely. On the word difficult, Tamsin's jaw tightened. Bill asked, You prepared his tea? Yes, I always did. Her voice softened. For consistency. A pause, a clue. Lionel's tea ritual mattered. Jessup asked, Mrs. Pargeter, you were briefly absent before dessert. Why? I went to check the car, Tamsin replied. I thought I'd left the lights on. Agatha eyed her. Did you? Tamsin gave a thin smile. They weren't on after all. Agatha tucked the detail away. Convenient excuse or nervous truth? Hard to tell. When interviews wrapped, Agatha cornered Bill. You need to focus on Tamsin. Bill sighed. Agatha, we look at everyone. Yes, but she hovers like a woman hiding something. So do you, Bill said lightly. Agatha ignored that. At the vicarage, Mrs. Bloxby welcomed Agatha with tea and a plate of ginger biscuits. The kitchen glowed with homely comfort, a sharp contrast to the vestry's tension. Mrs. Bloxby sat with a weary sigh. It's been dreadful, Agatha. Truly dreadful. Agatha sipped her tea. "Your husband is behaving oddly, even for him." Mrs. Blocksby looked troubled. "He's apologizing for everything, thanking everyone. He barely sleeps. It's unusual." "Unusual," Agatha said. "It's deranged. He thanked Lionel for insulting him." Mrs. Blocksby folded her hands. "I fear Lionel had influence over him." Agatha leaned in. "Blackmail?" Mrs. Blocksby hesitated. Her silence spoke. Agatha felt vindicated. "He's hiding something." Mrs. Blocksby shook her head gently. "If he is, he believes it's for the parish's good." "That man could guilt-trip a saint," Agatha muttered. "Your husband needs a spine transplant." Mrs. Blocksby gave a soft laugh, then grew quiet. Red herrings littered the day. Bill discovered Lionel had argued with Terry earlier about inferior materials. Brenda had been seen shredding paperwork in the vestry, which she claimed was pastoral housekeeping. Colin told the choir he was ready to walk out for good because of the keyboard humiliation. Everyone looked guilty. Everyone looked innocent. Everyone had motive, which, Agatha thought with smug satisfaction, meant everyone needed her. When Agatha returned home, she found something shoved through her letterbox, a single sheet of paper. The typing was uneven, clumsy, like someone using an old machine. She read it aloud. "Leave it to the police or the next cup will be yours." She stared at it for a long, thrilled moment. Then she smiled. "Well," she told the empty hallway, "someone finally recognizes my importance." Hodge trotted in from the sitting room, stretched luxuriously, and yawned as though murder threats were a dull interruption to his evening. Agatha folded the note carefully. "Don't look so unimpressed. This means I'm getting close." Hodge flicked an ear, unimpressed. Agatha placed the note on the mantel and filled the kettle. A low hum filled the cottage, warm, familiar, faintly mocking. "Let them threaten," she muttered. "I've been threatened by experts." The kettle began to sigh. Hodge curled on his chair, tail tucked, eyes half closed. Agatha smiled into the cosy dimness. "Let's see who tries to frighten Agatha Raisin," she said softly. "They'll regret it." And with Hodge stretching like a tiny tiger and the kettle clicking gently off, the village around her settled into uneasy quiet, the kind that promised deeper secrets waiting for morning. "Vicar, explain this at once." Agatha burst through the vicarage kitchen door, waving the anonymous note like a solicitor brandishing incriminating evidence. Hodge, tucked under her arm because he had insisted on following her, gave a low, unimpressed meow. Mr. Blocksby, seated at the table with a neat stack of envelopes, looked up with startled politeness. "Good morning, Mrs. Raisin. You seem energized." "Energized?" Agatha barked. "I'm being threatened, and you're writing thank-you letters to anyone who ever sneezed near the church." "They've all been so understanding during this difficult time," he said mildly, dipping his pen back into its ink. "Gratitude should never be delayed." Agatha slapped the note down in front of him. "Read it, then stop being grateful and start being useful." He scanned it, brow furrowing with gentle concern rather than alarm. "Oh dear, how unpleasant. But I wouldn't worry, Mrs. Raisin. Likely a silly prank. These things happen in times of strain." "A prank?" Agatha cried. "Someone threatened to poison me next." "That seems unlikely," Mr. Blocksby said soothingly. "You mustn't distress yourself." Agatha stared at him. "Your parishioner was murdered in your hall. You're drowning in police questions. Lionel had half the village ready to revolt, and you're telling me not to distress myself." He clasped his hands. "Anger doesn't solve anything." "Neither does excessive politeness," Agatha exploded. Mrs. Blocksby appeared then, her gentle presence instantly calming the kitchen. "Agatha, dear, breathe. Have some tea. Doris brought scones." Agatha dropped into a chair, muttering. Hodge leapt onto her lap, kneading with smug satisfaction. Mrs. Blocksby set a plate of slightly lopsided scones on the table. Doris's nerves had evidently survived last night's drama. "Now," Mrs. Blocksby said, seating herself, "tell us everything." Agatha did. The note, the vestry suspects, the strange behaviour she sensed all around. The vicar listened with folded hands, nodding earnestly, offering reassurance every third sentence. When Agatha finished, Mrs. Blocksby hesitated. "Agatha, Lionel had certain information. He was not a kind man when it came to secrets." The vicar shifted uncomfortably. "Let's not exaggerate." "Lionel was threatening you?" Agatha cut in, leaning forward. Mr. Bloxby flushed. He wasn't threatening me. Not precisely. He merely suggested that if people refused to cooperate with his fundraising innovations, he might feel obliged to speak with diocesan authorities about legacy matters. Agatha's eyes widened. Legacy matters? Old finances, the vicar murmured, from before my time. The records were muddled. I tried my best, of course, but Lionel was convinced something improper occurred decades ago. He sighed. I responded with patience. You responded with grovelling, Agatha said bluntly. Mrs. Bloxby touched her husband's arm. He didn't want scandal in the parish. But he allowed Lionel to bully him, Agatha exclaimed. No wonder you're avoiding Bill's calls. The vicar reddened further. I am not avoiding the police. I am prioritising pastoral duties. Bill told me you've given 5 thank you statements and not one useful fact, Agatha said. The vicar dropped his gaze. I cannot speak ill of the dead. He wasn't ill, Agatha snapped. He was poisoned. Mrs. Bloxby gave her a gentle look. Agatha, please. Agatha huffed, taking one of Doris's scones and biting into it hard enough to terrify Pastry. I'm only trying to help. We know, Mrs. Bloxby said kindly, but some matters weigh heavily on conscience. Agatha narrowed her eyes. He knows something, and he's hiding it. Mrs. Bloxby didn't deny it. Later that afternoon, Bill arrived at Agatha's cottage looking as worn as a constable after a 3-day fete. Hodge sat on the windowsill, tail flicking with territorial disdain. Bill stepped inside with a sigh. Agatha, I need clarity. Your friend the vicar is being impossible. Welcome to the club, Agatha said. He practically recites thank yous instead of information. Bill ran a hand through his hair. His statements contradict one another. He's polite to the point of paralysis. I can't determine whether he's hiding guilt or just terrified of offending everyone. He's hiding something, Agatha said. Lionel was blackmailing him. Bill straightened. What? Mrs. Bloxby hinted, Agatha said. Again, politely. Honestly, this village may collapse under the weight of manners. Bill sank onto her sofa. I need him to talk. Then stop being kind, Agatha said. Ask hard questions. Bill gave her a weary smile. Unlike you, I have regulations. Agatha puffed with self-satisfaction. Regulations are overrated. She handed him a cup of tea. Also, Terry is lying about where he was. Brenda is furious at being considered a suspect, and Colin told half the pub last night that Lionel deserved whatever he got. Bill scribbled notes. Anything else? Yes, Agatha said grandly. I received a death threat. Bill nearly spilled his tea. Agatha! Oh, don't fuss. It was typed on an ancient machine, probably meant to intimidate me. Instead, it confirmed I'm making progress. Bill closed his eyes. Please don't escalate things. Agatha smirked. I don't escalate. I reveal. That evening, Agatha wandered to the Red Lion, hoping for more gossip. The pub buzzed with subdued excitement, the kind villagers pretended was concern, but which tasted suspiciously like enjoyment. Terry sat at the bar, nursing a pint. When Agatha approached, he stiffened. Heard you were with a client when Lionel collapsed, she said casually. That's right, he muttered. The landlord says you were outside alone. Terry flushed. The landlord is nosy. Agatha smiled sweetly. So am I. Who's the client? He muttered something unintelligible and fled to the smoking area. Across the room, Brenda was engaged in vigorous complaining. The police hound me because I was near the tea. Meanwhile, certain widows, she jabbed finger quotes in the air, are treated delicately. Agatha joined her. You shredded papers in the vestry. Routine, Brenda sniffed. Confidential minutes. Lionel had scribbled all over them. Did you dislike him? Agatha asked. Brenda's eyes gleamed. Dislike is not a strong enough word. Colin sat alone in a corner. When Agatha approached, he muttered, I hope the police ask about artistic cruelty. That keyboard solo should be a crime. Did you argue with Lionel? Agatha asked. Colin straightened. Frequently, but poisoning is beneath me. I believe in moral superiority, not chemical warfare. Agatha found that disappointingly convincing. When she returned home, Hodge met her at the door with a chirp. Agatha tossed her handbag onto the side table and sent the anonymous note fluttering to the floor. Hodge leapt onto the table, batting at the church fundraising leaflet tucked beside it. Both papers slid, colliding, smearing a bit of ink. Agatha bent to pick them up. Her eyes narrowed. The typeface, the misaligned letters, the faint ink smudges. It matched. The church newsletter had been typed on the same clumsy old typewriter as the threat. She felt a thrill. Well, well, someone close to the vicarage wants me off the case, Hodge purred, pleased with himself. Agatha held the two papers together, smiling at the confirmation. Good boy, she murmured. You've just identified my blackmailer. She straightened the papers, placed them on the mantel and filled the kettle. Hodge curled on the armchair, whiskers twitching with smug satisfaction. The kettle hummed gently. Agatha watched steam rise, tasting the warm satisfaction of discovery, tinged with mischief. Oh yes, she whispered. Someone is worried. And they should be. The kettle clicked off. Hodge stretched lazily, claiming the room as his kingdom. Agatha smiled, sharp and ready. Tomorrow, Carsley would learn she was far from done. Charles, if you don't get here within the next 5 minutes, I shall solve this case without you, Agatha snapped into the receiver. Hodge, sprawled on the table beside her, flicked his tail as though unimpressed by either threat or timing. Sir Charles Frayth's amused voice drifted down the line. Aggie, solving cases is your favourite way to ruin my breakfast. This isn't a case, she declared. It's a village catastrophe, and you adore catastrophe. A pause. Then Charles sighed dramatically. Fine, I'll be there, but only if there's food, real food, not your murder scene pastries. Agatha hung up before he could elaborate. She muttered to Hodge, he's lucky he's useful. Hodge blinked, unconvinced. Minutes later, the familiar rumble of Charles's vintage convertible echoed down Lilac Lane. Agatha flung open her door. Charles stepped out, immaculate in casual tweed. You look dreadful, he said cheerfully. Stress doesn't flatter you. Agatha scowled. Get in. We're going to Mercester for breakfast, and you're paying. He followed her into the car with a smirk. A woman threatening murder should never drive. Over a late breakfast in Mercester, Agatha choosing a virtuous grapefruit she resented, Charles ordering enough fried items to start a small war, she laid out the story. Lionel bullied half the village, she said. He controlled his wife. He blackmailed the vicar. He insulted me, and now someone's poisoned him. Charles buttered toast lazily. Many motives. Deliciously messy. Continue. She explained the tea, the sweeteners, the vicar's odd behaviour, the typed threat. Charles stirred his tea. And you want my help because... You have London contacts, Agatha snapped, and money, and a face solicitors grovel to. Charles grinned. Ah, the flattery begins. It has not begun, she growled. I'll flatter you when you deserve it. They drove to Evesham, where Lionel's solicitor kept a tidy office above a carpet shop. Charles's title opened the door. His charm opened the solicitor. We wish to clarify certain donation-related items, Charles said in a tone suggesting he was granting the man a royal honour. The solicitor flustered happily. Of course, Sir Charles. Anything for the community. Agatha leaned forward. About Mr. Pargeter's will. The solicitor coughed delicately. Recent adjustments were in progress, nothing signed yet. Adjustments? Agatha prodded. A new structure, the solicitor said, glancing nervously between them. A significant legacy to the church roof fund. Mrs. Pargeter would receive the house. Business assets were to be handled separately. But nothing was executed, Charles repeated. Correct. Under the old will, the solicitor admitted, Mrs. Pargeter inherits more fully. Agatha sat back, pulse quickening. So Tamsin benefits more if Lionel dies before signing the new will. The solicitor paled. Well, yes, though I must stress, of course, Charles said smoothly. You've been very helpful. Outside, Agatha grabbed Charles's arm. Tamsin had motive, a big one. Yes, Charles said, but so does the church. Think of the roof, Aggie, a large legacy, enough to fund your WI dreams. Agatha narrowed her eyes. I don't like this direction. Truth rarely likes you first, Charles said. She punched his arm lightly. He laughed. Back in Carsley, they parted ways briefly. Charles drifted toward the Pargeter house, where Tamsin greeted him with cool politeness. Agatha suspected he enjoyed the challenge of flirtation, where warmth was improbable. Agatha instead headed to the vicarage garden, where Mrs. Bloxby clipped roses with patient precision. "Did Lionel meet with your husband before the fundraiser?" Agatha asked. Mrs. Bloxby nodded. "Yes, a private meeting," Lionel insisted. "And after?" "He seemed shaken," Mrs. Bloxby admitted. "He said Lionel had offered him a second chance regarding past financial confusion, but he wouldn't explain further." Agatha folded her arms. "He's hiding something." Mrs. Bloxby gave a rueful smile. "If he is, he believes silence protects the parish." "Well, it doesn't," Agatha declared. "It only protects the murderer." Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "Please be gentle with him." Agatha, who had never been gentle with anything, made a non-committal noise. Charles reappeared at the gate, looking infuriatingly pleased with himself. "Tamsin likes me." "She likes silence," Agatha retorted. "You interpret silence as devotion." "Still counts," Charles said lightly. Mrs. Bloxby arched an eyebrow. "Did she say anything helpful?" Charles shrugged. "Only that Lionel managed everything poorly except his own ego." Agatha grunted. "Not exactly news." Carsley buzzed with fresh red herrings that afternoon. Brenda cornered Agatha outside the shop. "We must protect the parish from grasping widows," she hissed. "Tamsin will sell every pew unless we act." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Your paranoia is exhausting." Brenda flared. "Justice is exhausting. Ignorance is restful." Agatha escaped before the debate escalated into hymn-throwing. Terry Jenkins intercepted her near the green. Saw Tamsin's car near Mercester 3 days before the fundraiser. Daniel was with her. Agatha nearly choked. "Daniel? Our curate Daniel?" "Looked serious," Terry said, pleased to have ammunition. "Could be an affair." "Or pastoral counselling," Agatha snapped. "Try thinking once." She stalked off. Behind her, Terry muttered something about her being touchy. Colin, overheard at the Red Lion, raged loudly about rumours he planned to leave Carsley. "I'm not abandoning my post because of one Philistine nephew and his instrument of torture." Agatha noted the passion but found it unconvincing as murder energy. Colin preferred musical vengeance. By early evening, Agatha sat with Charles in her cottage, papers spread across the coffee table. "So," Charles said lazily, "we have a widow who profits from the old will, a vicar blackmailed by the deceased, a builder owed money, a churchwarden with a vendetta, an organist with bruised pride, and you, Aggie, hovering near the tea-urn." She glared. "I did not poison Lionel. I don't even know how to spell half the chemicals involved." "Poison doesn't require grammar," Charles said. "Bill said the poison was in the tea," Agatha snapped, "and only a handful of people were near it." Charles smirked. "Including you." She threw a cushion at him. He dodged. The phone rang. Agatha snatched it up. "If this is Brenda—" "It's Bill," came the steady voice. Agatha straightened. "Tell me you found something." "We have," Bill said. "Toxicology confirms the substance was administered through Lionel's herbal tea, introduced as a powdered additive, most likely through the sweetener. We're certain of it now." Agatha's heart quickened. "And the urn?" Bill hesitated. "Only a few people were close enough to tamper with it. You, Tamsin, Brenda, Terry. Colin passed it briefly. Daniel topped up mugs." Agatha swallowed. "So half the village." "Not half," Bill corrected. "A very tight group. And Aggie," his voice softened, "your name is near the top of the proximity list." Charles mouthed, "I told you so." Agatha threw him a murderous glare. Bill continued, "I'll need you to come in tomorrow to clarify your movements." "Bill Wong," she declared, "if you think I poisoned that man—" "I don't," Bill said firmly, "but clarity is crucial." Agatha huffed, feeling both vindicated and insulted. "Fine, I'll come." She hung up. Charles rose, smoothing his jacket. "Well, Aggie, exciting developments." "Get out," she muttered. He grinned, kissed her cheek and left. Agatha sank into her armchair. Hodge looked up, blinked once, then stretched luxuriously. "Well," she said, rubbing his head, "apparently I'm now a prime suspect." Hodge curled up, deeply unconcerned. The kettle clicked softly in the kitchen, filling the room with its familiar domestic sigh, gentle, steady, and utterly unfazed by murder, wills, or flirtatious aristocrats. Agatha exhaled. "Tomorrow we get answers. Get." Hodge purred, pleased with her resolve. "I am not being arrested for proximity." Agatha stormed into the vicarage hallway without bothering to knock. Hodge, having refused to stay home, trotted in behind her with a superior flick of the tail. "Where is your husband? I need answers before Bill starts imagining things." Mrs. Bloxby, serene as ever, emerged from the kitchen with a tea towel in her hands. "He's in the study, dear, but do try not to shout at him. He's rehearsing Lionel's memorial address." "Good," Agatha snapped. "He can rehearse telling the truth." She marched down the hall and flung open the study door. There sat Mr. Bloxby, surrounded by neat piles of pastel pastoral leaflets, reading aloud in a voice dripping with impeccable gentleness. "We gather to remember Lionel Pargeter, a man of considerable energy whose contributions were always offered with enthusiasm." He paused, grimacing. "No, that sounds uncharitable, or perhaps too charitable." Agatha crossed her arms. "You sound like you're memorializing a malfunctioning lawnmower." Mr. Bloxby jumped slightly. "Mrs. Raisin, I didn't hear you come in." "That's because you were drowning in politeness," Agatha said. "Now tell me what you're hiding. Bill thinks I'm a suspect." The vicar folded his hands, as if praying she would vanish. "Mrs. Raisin, you mustn't exaggerate. Proximity merely means you were near the tea." "I was near the tea because I was near civilization," Agatha snapped. "This village would still be chewing stale custard if not for me." Mr. Bloxby cleared his throat delicately. "Nevertheless, the investigation must follow its course." Agatha leaned over his desk. "Your excessive niceness is obstructing justice. What did Lionel tell you?" The vicar coloured. "Nothing of consequence." Mrs. Bloxby slipped quietly into the room and shut the door behind her. "Perhaps," she said gently, "something of consequence ought to be shared now." Agatha seized on it. "Yes, listen to your wife. She has a functioning spine." Mr. Bloxby looked pained. "Agatha, please." "No," Mrs. Bloxby said, her tone soft but unyielding. "You cannot keep protecting everyone at the cost of clarity." The vicar sank into his chair. It wasn't a confession, not formally, but Lionel spoke freely before the fundraiser. Agatha's eyes narrowed. "Spoke about what?" The vicar twisted his fingers. "He boasted he'd been using sensitive parish information to secure business deals, matters entrusted to him during his philanthropic collaborations." Agatha stiffened. "He used confidential information? What kind?" "Financial histories," the vicar whispered. "Old legacies, donor records. He implied he'd used them to underpay certain contractors." "Terry?" Agatha said. "I didn't ask names," the vicar said quickly. "It felt sordid." "And that's not all," Mrs. Bloxby murmured. Mr. Bloxby looked miserable. "He suggested that a certain prominent Carsley woman had given him gossip, information he used to pressure planning committees." Agatha froze. "Which prominent woman?" "I cannot say," the vicar said firmly. "Speaking ill of the deceased would be quite unchristian." Agatha's voice rose. "The man blackmailed half the county, and you're worried about his reputation." Mrs. Bloxby laid a calming hand on her husband's shoulder. "Niceness, my dear, is not always goodness. Sometimes it's fear." That struck him more deeply than any of Agatha's accusations. He looked down at his folded hands. "I only wanted to spare people shame." "And instead," Agatha said, "you're helping a murderer." Mrs. Bloxby gave her a warning look. "Agatha." "Well, he is," Agatha insisted. "If he knows something that clears me and he won't say it, that's practically aiding and abetting." Mr. Bloxby lifted his head. "I will pray on it." Agatha threw her arms in the air. "Wonderful. By the time you finish praying, Brenda will have staged a coup, Terry will have built a motorway through the churchyard, and I'll be in a holding cell." That evening, Bill arrived at Agatha's cottage with more news. Hodge was sprawled in his favourite chair, judging everyone equally. Bill held up a thin folder. We traced the anonymous note. Agatha sat straighter. "Finally! Who wrote it?" "Well," Bill said, "the typewriter it was made on is the same one used for church notices and newsletters." Agatha blinked. "You mean the ancient one in the church office? The one Brenda guards like a relic?" "Could be Brenda," Bill said. "Could be Daniel. He uses the office at odd hours. Could be anyone with a key." "Or the vicarage," Agatha said triumphantly. "He has access. So does Mrs. Bloxby." Bill sighed. "Agatha, we are not implicating the vicarage." "I am," she said briskly. "Someone threatened me. I refuse to be democratic about suspects." Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. Just be careful. Agatha smiled sweetly. Careful is for people with dull lives. Later, after Bill left, Charles returned, impatient for action. "We're going staking out," Agatha declared. "Someone is meeting at the church late. I can feel it." "You can feel indigestion," Charles said. "You often confuse the two." But he followed her out the door, because he always did. The church loomed in a fine, damp mist. Not rain, but a drifting veil that made the stone walls look slightly blurred. It wasn't a weather opening. It was atmosphere that mattered. Agatha and Charles crouched behind a yew bush. Agatha adjusted her scarf dramatically. Charles adjusted his expectations downward. "You know," Charles whispered, "we could have done this from the comfort of my car." "Hush," Agatha hissed. "Spies never sit in convertibles." "Mine has better suspension than this shrub." "Stop complaining." Charles peered toward the vestry. "Someone's coming." The door creaked open. A figure stepped into the misty glow of the porch lamp. Daniel. He looked tense, glancing around nervously. Then another figure emerged behind him. Tamsin Pargeter. Agatha elbowed Charles. "Aha, I knew it. An affair." "Or a murderer's pact," Charles whispered. "Far more interesting." Tamsin's face was strained, her voice low. Daniel kept wringing his hands. They were too far to hear properly, but their posture screamed secrecy. Tamsin touched Daniel's arm. He flinched like she'd burned him. "Oh yes," Agatha whispered. "Guilt. Romantic or criminal? Possibly both." Daniel said something sharply. Tamsin looked away, blinking rapidly. Then they parted, she heading toward the lane, he back into the vestry darkness. Agatha grabbed Charles's sleeve. "This is it. They're hiding something big." Charles smirked. "Your instincts are dramatically unreliable, but occasionally entertaining." "Entertaining?" Agatha sputtered. "I'm on the verge of cracking a murder case." "You're on the verge of frostbite," Charles said. "Can we go home?" But Agatha's pulse was racing. Between a vicar drowning in politeness, a widow sneaking around at night, and a curate who looked ready to faint, the truth was within reach. Which one was the killer? Which one feared discovery enough to type a threat? Which one had stood closest to the tea urn? Agatha rose, brushing leaves from her coat. "Tomorrow," she said, "we confront someone. I just haven't decided who." Charles offered an arm with exaggerated gallantry. "Lead on, Miss Marple." She smacked him lightly. He chuckled. They walked back toward her cottage, the mist curling around them like a curtain preparing for the next act. Inside, Hodge lifted his head from the sofa, stretched extravagantly, and yawned in disdain at their dramatic entrance. Agatha locked the door, muttering, "Everyone in this village is lying." Hodge blinked slowly, unimpressed by human failings. The kettle sighed to life in the kitchen, filling the cottage with its familiar warm promise. Agatha felt a spark of satisfaction. Tomorrow, someone's mask would slip. Hodge curled into a cosy loaf, tail tucked neatly, as if settling in for the next revelation. "Ladies, stop dithering and start arranging," Agatha barked, marching into the WI hall with the confident stride of a general inspecting uninspired troops. "This is not a séance. It's a healing coffee morning," Doris squeaked. "But Mrs. Raisin, the tables are fine," Agatha declared. "The attitude is lacking." The WI members, long accustomed to Agatha's leadership by intimidation, shuffled into motion. The same hall where Lionel had dramatically collapsed now gleamed with nervous polish. Someone had overdone the air freshener. The faint citrus tang fought desperately with the smell of disinfectant. This time Agatha left Hodge at home. After the recent chaos, she refused to risk anyone blaming him for yet another commotion. Agatha clapped her hands. "Remember, ladies, we are here to promote unity, comfort, and community resilience, primarily displayed through my extraordinary courage." Mrs. Bloxby, arranging napkins, offered a gentle smile. "Perhaps focus on the group spirit, dear." "I am the spirit," Agatha replied. "But very well. Group spirit, if you insist." Doris hovered nervously over a tray of sandwiches Agatha had not made herself, though she had threatened anyone who suggested she had bought them. "Doris," Agatha said sharply, "those are for me. Keep them separate. I don't want another humiliation." "Yes, Mrs. Raisin." Doris nodded, turning so quickly she nearly collided with Brenda. Brenda sniffed dramatically. "Honestly, Agatha, some of us think this event is far too soon." Agatha narrowed her eyes. Some of us think you should stop thinking altogether. Brenda bristled. Community reflection requires dignity. And yet you're here, Agatha muttered. The coffee morning filled slowly. Hesitant villagers, forced smiles, and the unmistakable buzzing tension of half a dozen amateur detectives convinced they already knew the killer. Agatha basked in the attention. People whispered about the threatening note, and she enjoyed pretending she didn't overhear. She decided it was time for a speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, tapping a cup for attention, "Carsley has suffered a terrible shock, but as your local pillar of resilience—" A muffled groan escaped from the back. She ignored it. "I believe it is vital that we come together, share comfort, and show that one unfortunate poisoning cannot—" Mrs. Blocksby coughed. "Alleged poisoning cannot break our spirit." She placed a noble hand on her chest. "I, Agatha Raisin, remain steadfast." Colin muttered. "She remains something." Agatha shot him a glare but continued. "Now let us enjoy coffee, fellowship, and my personal bravery." The group applauded uncertainly. Chaos struck minutes later. Doris, flustered and overwhelmed, mixed up plates while trying to answer 3 questions at once. Without noticing, she handed Brenda the sandwiches meant for Agatha. Brenda ate 2 with indignant dignity, then paused. "I feel unwell." Agatha looked up sharply. "Oh, stop being dramatic." Brenda clutched her stomach. "No, really." And then she collapsed in spectacular, theatrical fashion, knocking over a jug of milk and landing in Doris's lap. Shrieks erupted. Chairs scraped. Someone yelled for smelling salts despite not owning any. Colin flung open a window as if fresh air could cure moral corruption. Agatha knelt beside Brenda. "What did you eat?" "Your sandwiches," Brenda whimpered. They're cursed." A ripple of real panic went through the hall. Doris squealed. "I didn't mean to. Mrs. Raisin, I mixed the plates." Agatha turned pale. My sandwiches?" Her voice rose. "Were they tampered with?" Brenda moaned impressively, sliding halfway under the table. "It wasn't poison," squeaked Doris. "I checked the filling." "You can't check for poison by looking," Agatha shrieked. Pandemonium doubled. At that moment, Bill Wong entered the hall like a man walking into a tornado. "What now?" he demanded. Everyone shouted at once. "Agatha poisoned Brenda." "No, Brenda poisoned herself. The sandwiches are bewitched. Colin brought suspicious chutney." Bill raised both hands. "Quiet." The room fell into uneasy silence. Bill crouched by Brenda, who looked both miserable and eager for attention. "What exactly are you feeling?" "Sickness, dread, a crawling sensation of doom." Bill sniffed the plate. "This isn't poison, it's a very strong laxative." Brenda's eyes bulged. "A what?" Agatha sat back, stunned. "Someone attempted to frighten me." "Or me," Brenda wailed. "Why is no one considering me?" Bill turned to Agatha. "Why did you arrange this event?" "To create community healing," she said loftily. Bill folded his arms. "In the hall where a man died?" Agatha hesitated. "Symbolic healing." Bill sighed deeply. "Mrs. Raisin, you've effectively created a second incident scene." She bristled. "You're welcome." "I didn't thank you." "You did in your heart." Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. "Look, this proves nothing except someone wants to scare either you or Brenda." "Or kill me," Brenda moaned. "No one is killing anyone," Bill said. "But now I need statements. Again." Groans filled the hall. Suspicions blossomed like weeds. Terry was questioned first. He announced loudly, "I went to Mercester for groceries. Ask anyone." The WI members exchanged skeptical looks. Colin admitted to being in the kitchen unsupervised, but insisted he would rather commit musical sabotage than gastrointestinal harm. Daniel stammered. I helped Doris with plates. I didn't do anything else. I barely touched the sandwiches." Tamsin arrived late, composed but pale. "I wasn't here earlier," she said calmly. "But I wouldn't dream of harming Brenda." Brenda glared from her chair. "I don't believe a word of it." Bill rubbed his temples. "Everyone is a suspect. Again." Everyone blamed Agatha. Again. When the hall finally emptied and the chaos ebbed, Mrs. Blocksby sat with Agatha, who was pacing furiously. "This village," Agatha declared, "is full of lunatics. Mrs. Blocksby folded her hands. "I'm afraid there's more, dear." Agatha stopped mid-stride. "More? I think Mr. Blocksby knows which parishioner has been slipping into the church office after hours." Agatha gasped. "The note-writer." Mrs. Blocksby nodded sadly. "But he won't tell Bill. His conscience won't allow it." Agatha groaned. "His politeness is actively obstructing a murder investigation." Mrs. Blocksby looked troubled. "He believes kindness should prevail." Agatha flung her arms wide. "Kindness doesn't prevail when people are slipping laxatives into sandwiches." Mrs. Blocksby sighed. "Please be gentle." "I'll save his soul through nosiness," Agatha declared. "It's my only spiritual gift." That night, unable to rest, Agatha marched back to the W.I. Hall to reconstruct the sandwich disaster. Keys jangling, she let herself in. The empty hall felt strangely theatrical, as though the walls were ready for another performance. She crossed the polished floor toward the kitchen. The faint smell of herbs lingered, odd, given they had served nothing herbal. She flicked on the light. Near the sink sat an empty mug. A faint residue lined its rim. Herbal tea, the same Lionel loved. Agatha leaned closer. "Why is that here?" She opened the cupboard. A sweetener jar sat slightly ajar. On the handle was a small smear of sweetener, sticky, unmistakable. The same detail Bill had mentioned regarding Lionel's tea. Agatha's pulse quickened. Here was something someone thought too small to notice. She whispered, "Got you." The hall was silent, save for the soft hum of the overhead lights. Agatha locked up, pocketing the growing certainty that she was narrowing the field. Back home, Hodge greeted her with a sleepy stretch and a pointed yawn, as if asking why humans needed so much drama. Agatha filled the kettle, feeling the warm promise of tea and triumph. "We're close, Hodge," she murmured. The kettle sighed. Hodge curled smugly, and Agatha smiled, sharp, satisfied, and ready for the next move. "Agatha, we need to talk," Bill said grimly the next morning, standing in her doorway with the expression of a man about to deliver a parking fine to a crocodile. Hodge, perched on the hall table, swished his tail with disdain, instinctively siding against authority. Agatha crossed her arms. If this is about Brenda, she started it by collapsing like a wounded ostrich. Bill stepped inside. "Toxicology confirms the sandwiches contained crushed tablets, not poison. A strong over-the-counter laxative, used to scare and cause chaos." Agatha blinked. Lionel used laxatives? No wonder he was insufferable. "That's not the point," Bill snapped. "Those tablets were deliberately added. Someone tampered with the plate reserved for you." Agatha straightened. "So I was the target." "Or Brenda," Bill said. "Or," he sighed, "or you were simply convenient for blame." She gaped at him. "Are you suggesting I drugged Brenda? Why would I?" Bill hesitated. "Because several witnesses saw you near the refreshments table alone, and because you declared loudly that today you were in control of everything." Agatha's jaw dropped. "Bill Wong, how dare you imply I manage catering?" He fixed her with a weary look. "Agatha, you attract chaos. You can't pretend otherwise." She paced, furious. "I am not being turned into a suspect in my own investigation." "You're not a suspect," Bill said quickly, "but the villagers are gossiping, loudly. The anonymous note," he held it up, "suggests you're being framed or frightened, or both." Agatha stabbed a finger at him. "Then protect me instead of accusing me." Bill rubbed his forehead. "Just stay put today. No schemes. Please." Agatha bristled but nodded. "Fine, but only because I have better things to do." Hodge meowed triumphantly, as though dismissing the entire police force with one sound. Charles arrived an hour later, uninvited but welcome. He wandered in through her garden gate with the languid grace of a cat burglar who'd retired for moral reasons. "You look murderous," he said cheerfully. "Tea?" Agatha flung herself onto the sofa. "Bill thinks I drugged Brenda." Charles snorted. "If you did, she'd still be running to the hospital." "That's not funny," Agatha snapped. "They think I'm the problem." "My dear," Charles said, sitting beside her, "you are the problem, gloriously, which is why someone is using you." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "Explain." "Your presence is like a glitter bomb," Charles said. "Every scene becomes about you. If someone wanted to hide mischief, they'd do it behind your flare. Who benefits from you being discredited?" Agatha frowned. Someone hoping I stop investigating. Or someone who wants to distract suspicion, Charles added. You're the perfect lightning rod. Agatha sighed. I hate being useful to murderers. That's the spirit, Charles said. Determined not to mope, she reviewed each suspect again, this time with bitterness sharp enough to pickle onions. Terry. Lionel's death ruined his contracts. And someone mentioned Terry returning from Mercester earlier than he claimed. Terry was a man whose paperwork was rarely precise. Colin. Now that Lionel was dead, no one could challenge his musical authority. He had spent the last days basking in newfound respect, albeit respect born from pity. Daniel. His secretive meetings with Tamsin nagged at Agatha. If they weren't romantic, they were conspiratorial. Daniel looked ready to faint whenever questioned, which made him suspicious by default. Tamsin, the cool widow, her grief neat and elegant. Suddenly the village adored her. She was managing sympathy like a seasoned actress, and she inherited more under the old will. Agatha muttered, Everyone has something to hide, except me. I'm too honest. Charles raised an eyebrow. You lie about baking. That's hardly a sin. Not in this village, Charles agreed. Later, while rummaging in a drawer for cigarettes, she pretended not to smoke any more. Agatha's hand brushed an old church leaflet. She pulled it out and frowned at the misaligned type. The same crooked letters, the same uneven spacing, the same clumsy machine that typed the anonymous note. Her heart thudded, not because the typewriter link was new, but because something else finally clicked. Tamsin had been typing memorial paperwork on that same temperamental church machine. If anyone could produce a note with those exact crooked letters, it was her. Agatha's mind replayed the details she'd missed at the time. Tamsin had been helping with the memorial order of service, which meant time in the church office and hands on that temperamental typewriter. Agatha hadn't clocked the significance then. Now it mattered. She marched to the kitchen, leaflet in hand. Hodge followed, clearly sensing drama. This wasn't Brenda's typing, Agatha whispered, or Daniel's. Tamsin used the wretched machine. Hodge leapt onto the counter and pawed at the leaflet, leaving a faint cat hair on the edge, the mark of official Raisin approval. Agatha felt a thrill. She sent the note. She wants me frightened. She wants me discredited. But why? What advantage did Tamsin gain from driving Agatha into the line of suspicion? Charles returned with a biscuit tin. Any revelations? Agatha thrust the leaflet toward him. This is proof. The note was typed on the church machine and I saw Tamsin using it. Charles inspected the page. Interesting, but hardly definitive. It makes her more suspicious than Brenda, Agatha insisted. Everyone is more suspicious than Brenda, Charles said. Brenda is too busy being offended to commit clever crimes. Agatha paced. She sent the note. She likely tampered with the sandwiches. And she has motive regarding Lionel's will. Charles rested his chin in his hand. Slow down, Aggie. Remember your tendency to leap before looking. I do not leap, Agatha declared. You vault, Charles corrected. Agatha ignored him. If Tamsin wants me off the case, she's hiding something. Charles regarded her thoughtfully. Or she fears something. Agatha froze. What do you mean? Grief makes people careful, he said. Fear makes them strategic. Perhaps she thinks the killer will turn on her next. Agatha began pacing again, muttering, Or perhaps she is the killer. Charles shrugged elegantly. Possible. Or you're being dramatic. Also possible. Agatha spun toward him. She could have met Daniel for planning, or blackmail, or collusion. Or pastoral guidance, Charles said. Remember that quaint thing vicars do? I refuse to assume innocence, Agatha said. It's never led me anywhere useful. Charles chuckled. Well, Aggie, whatever the truth is, you're getting close. Someone is rattled. Agatha felt a surge of pride, followed by dread. Bill will arrest me before I unravel this. Charles stood, smoothing his jacket. Then unravel it faster. That evening, alone with her thoughts, Agatha sat at her dining table, Hodge curled beside her like a small, smug guardian. She spread out the clues, the misaligned typing, the herbal tea residue in the WI kitchen, the meetings between Tamsin and Daniel, the vicar's evasions. Everything pointed inward, toward the church, the office, and those closest to Lionel. She whispered, Tamsin isn't helpless. She's calculating. Hodge stretched a paw onto the leaflet. Agatha smiled faintly. Yes, you're right. She's not who she wants us to believe. A knock sounded at her door. Soft, apologetic, unmistakably polite. Mrs. Bloxby. Agatha let her in. Is something wrong? Mrs. Bloxby clasped her hands. My husband says there is something I should tell you, but he cannot. His conscience won't allow him. But I feel you will soon uncover it. Please, be kind when you do. Agatha softened. I'm never unkind to people who deserve kindness. Mrs. Bloxby gave her a rueful smile. That is precisely the difficulty. After she left, Agatha stood in the quiet cottage, absorbing the weight of the day. Rattled suspects. A threatening note, a near poisoning, a widow with hidden teeth. She exhaled slowly. Hodge rose, padded to his favourite chair and curled with a soft, approving purr. Agatha switched on the kettle. Its familiar sigh warmed the room, grounding her in cosy domesticity, despite the storm gathering outside her investigation. She murmured, "Tomorrow, Hodge. Tomorrow we follow the widow." Hodge blinked, unimpressed but loyal. And Agatha Raisin, suspect, sleuth, nuisance, and scourge of murderous village politics, felt the thrill of the chase sharpen once more. Agatha jabbed a finger at Charles. "We are doing this properly. No whining." "I never whine," he replied, stepping around a folded trestle table. "I murmur stylishly." Hodge, affronted by the harness Agatha had strapped onto him, let out a low, grumbling noise and stalked into the W.I. Hall kitchen. He disapproved of the entire morning and intended everyone to know. Agatha planted herself by the counter. "Right, we reconstruct Lionel's final tea, step by tedious step. If the police insist on plodding, then I shall gallop." Mrs. Bloxby set her handbag down with a gentle sigh. "I'm certain Bill didn't mean—" "Oh, he meant it," Agatha snapped. "If I hear the words proximity to the urn again, I'll drown someone in it." Charles opened a cupboard. "And here we go, shelves full of good intentions and stale icing sugar." "That's Doris's territory," Agatha said. "She claims it's organized. I claim it's a cry for help." They crowded around the large metal urn which had been lugged back from police testing and left on a table with a note from Bill reading, "Do not tamper." Agatha read it aloud in a mocking sing-song. "As if I've ever tampered in my life." Charles coughed lightly. "Intentionally," she amended. Mrs. Bloxby lifted a tray. "The sweeteners were kept here, beside the tea caddy." "And the cups were stacked there," Agatha said, pointing. "Lionel always insisted on herbal blends. He claimed they calmed him, which is rich considering he bullied half the parish." Charles peered into the sweetener jar. "Do we know if he scooped his own?" "No," Agatha said sharply. "Tamsin made it. And don't pretend you've forgotten that significant detail." Before Charles could respond, Hodge leapt onto the counter, landing with the heavy grace of a cat who believed himself chronically underappreciated. He sniffed, stretched, then batted a paw at a sticky cupboard handle. Agatha froze. "There! Look at that smudge." Mrs. Bloxby leaned in. "Yes, I remember Tamsin wiping her fingers there on the fundraiser evening. She said she'd spilled sweetener while fixing Lionel's tea." Agatha's eyes gleamed. "And last night, when I was here, that same handle was still tacky. Someone didn't clean up very well." Charles raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting she laced Lionel's cup right here?" "I'm suggesting," Agatha replied, "that only someone who made his tea regularly would know how to disguise crushed tablets in his sweetener. And the toxicology confirmed the poison was mixed with something powdery." Mrs. Bloxby inhaled quietly, troubled. She always prepared his herbal blend herself. She said consistency mattered. Agatha let out a triumphant sound. Consistency! Exactly the sort of domestic tyranny that hides murderous opportunity. Charles wandered to the tray. "Still, motives matter as much as method." "Which," Agatha said briskly, "brings us to your contribution, Sir Charles. You said you had information." He smiled, pleased to finally deliver gossip of value. "My London contacts pulled strings. Lionel's business affairs were, let's say, theatrical. Debts everywhere. If he'd lived to sign his new will, Tamsin would inherit the house and little else. The business interests were ready to collapse." Mrs. Bloxby looked aghast. "And under the old will?" "She gets everything," Charles replied, "including assets she can sell quickly before creditors howl." Agatha slapped her hands together. "Desperation! The oldest motive in the book. Tamsin needed money without the mess of Lionel's debts. Mrs. Blocksby sank onto a folding chair. But she seemed so composed. So does poison, Agatha said. That's why it works. They continued rearranging trays and cups, stepping through motions like amateur actors in a grim village play. At one point, Charles insisted Lionel might have wandered off for a biscuit, only for Agatha to correct him sharply. Lionel never fetched anything himself. He summoned. There's a difference. Bit by bit, the funnel narrowed. Terry's supposed financial ruin proved exaggerated. His other client was verified as a genuine appointment. Colin's tirades were, as Agatha had long suspected, 90% wind. And Daniel's late-night meetings with Tamsin were clarified by Mrs. Blocksby in a hushed tone. He was advising her on leaving Lionel. She feared him. She told Daniel she wanted to start again. Agatha paused. And Lionel found out. Punished her somehow. That alone would push anyone to the edge. Charles tapped the urn. But we still need proof, something undeniable. Oh, we'll get it, Agatha said, because Tamsin's tidy little facade is cracking. Hodge meowed, annoyed by the human dawdling. He strutted to Agatha and pawed her boot, demanding attention. She bent down automatically, only for her elbow to knock a drawer partially open. Inside sat a stack of church leaflets, one of which bore the unmistakably clumsy, misaligned type that had plagued the anonymous note. Agatha froze. Wait. She pulled the leaflet out. Same crooked margins, same inconsistent pressure. Mrs. Blocksby, she said slowly. Who typed the memorial paperwork last week? Tamsin, Mrs. Blocksby replied. Brenda was away and Daniel's hopeless with the machine. 2 fingers and panic, so Tamsin insisted on doing it. Tamsin insisted on helping despite everything. Agatha exhaled triumph. And there it is. She had access to the typewriter. She had reason to frighten me away from the investigation, and she knew Lionel's tea routine. Charles looked genuinely impressed, which annoyed Agatha slightly because she preferred him mildly patronizing. It made victory sweeter. So what now, Detective Queen? We set a trap, Agatha said. A quiet talk in the church. Just Tamsin, the vicar, and a little gentle pressure. Mrs. Blocksby looked worried. Do be careful. Tamsin may be desperate. Oh, she won't attack me, Agatha said. People rarely attack someone who talks as much as I do. It ruins the pacing. Charles laughed. And the vicar? He'll be our bait, Agatha said. Unwitting bait. Polite bait. The sort of bait that thanks the murderer for attending. They locked the hall, stepping outside into a bright, crisp afternoon. The village green lay quiet, the world unaware that Agatha felt the case beginning to tighten like a noose, though preferably one that snared the murderer without endangering any beloved recurring characters. Back at the cottage, Agatha placed the sticky-handled leaflet on her table and examined it with deep satisfaction. Hodge hopped onto a chair, tail curling possessively around himself. He approved of progress, or at least of being near the centre of attention. Agatha flicked the kettle on. Nearly there, Hodge, nearly. The kettle sighed softly as though agreeing, and Hodge stretched luxuriously, settling into the warm domestic glow of a mystery closing in. Don't you dare thank her again, Agatha hissed. Mr. Blocksby froze mid-smile, his hands clasped as though in prayer. I was merely expressing politeness, Agatha snapped. We've had quite enough of that. It was late afternoon in the empty Castley church, shafts of gentle light cutting across the pews. Agatha had chosen it deliberately, quiet, respectable, echoing with moral expectation. If anything could force truth into the open, it was a church with centuries of judgment built into the stone. Tamsin arrived with the elegance of a woman attending a luncheon rather than an ambush. She wore black, understated and precise, her hair smooth, her expression unreadable. You wanted to discuss a memorial plaque, she asked lightly. Agatha gave her a thin smile. Among other things, please sit. Mr. and Mrs. Blocksby will stay. We require witnesses of a moral persuasion. Mrs. Blocksby looked stricken, but took her place beside the organ. Mr. Blocksby perched on the edge of the front pew, radiating nervous piety. Agatha folded her arms. I'll come straight to it. I know about the will. Tamsin blinked. Which will? Oh, don't be coy. The new one he never signed, the one that cut you out of several profitable ventures. Very inconvenient for you that Lionel was planning a long life." Charles, leaning against a pillar with the air of a decorative gargoyle, added, "Agatha does love a financial motive. It's her favourite seasoning." Tamsin's composure flickered, but only for a moment. "If you called me here to insult me, I fear you've wasted a journey." Agatha stepped closer. "I also know about the tablets, the sweeteners, what happens when you crush one into powder, and who always fussed over Lionel's herbal tea." A small tremor crossed Tamsin's mouth. Agatha withdrew a photocopy from her handbag with a triumphant flourish. "And then there's this." She held up the anonymous note and a church leaflet side by side. "Identical typing quirks, misaligned letters, same obsolete typewriter. You were helping with the memorial paperwork, weren't you? Plenty of time to produce threats." The church seemed to inhale. Tamsin's breath left her in one soft sigh. "I didn't mean to frighten you personally, Mrs. Raisin. I just wanted the investigation to stop circling the vicarage. I panicked." Mr. Blocksby made a wounded sound. Panicked?" Tamsin's poise crumbled at last. She sank into a pew, hands tightening around each other. Her voice, when it came, was low but steady. "You don't understand what Lionel was like. Not really. People saw him brash, boastful, charming when he wished. But at home," she shook her head, "nothing that leaves bruises. Nothing that could be photographed. Just pressure, endless pressure, mockery disguised as affection, plans made for me, not with me." Agatha, unexpectedly moved, sat beside her. Tamsin continued, staring ahead at the silent altar. "Daniel was helping me. I wanted to leave. Lionel found out. He said he'd ruin Daniel in the diocese, and me in the village. Then he told me he'd rewrite the new will again, remove me entirely, claim I'd been unfaithful, that I was unstable." Mrs. Blocksby murmured, "Oh, my dear." "He even threatened," Tamsin whispered, "to expose certain financial misdeeds using parish information, things he swore the vicar would be blamed for. He enjoyed leverage. It made him feel powerful." Mr. Blocksby looked stricken. "He hinted as much to me. I'm ashamed I didn't act. I thought kindness would diffuse matters. But kindness without courage is—" "Cowardice," Mrs. Blocksby said gently. "I've been waiting for you to admit it." He bowed his head. For once he said nothing polite. Agatha cleared her throat, regaining the centre of gravity. "Tamsin, did you poison Lionel's tea?" Tamsin closed her eyes. "Yes." The word echoed through the empty nave. "I crushed a powder into the sweetener," Tamsin whispered. "Something I shouldn't have had access to, but did. I knew Lionel's tea routine so well I could do it without anyone noticing. I chose it because it would disappear in the sweetness and the herbal taste. I thought it would only make him unwell, quiet, long enough for me to leave. But I was wrong. It killed him." "I thought, well, you know what I thought." Charles shifted uncomfortably, uncharacteristically solemn. "I didn't want him to die," Tamsin whispered. "Just to stop, to sleep through his temper, to give me room to leave. But I misjudged the dosage. I misjudged everything." Agatha stared at her, surprised by the honesty. Too honest, perhaps. No theatrics, no excuses, just bleak truth. "And Brenda's sandwiches?" Agatha asked. Tamsin shook her head sharply. "That wasn't meant to hurt anyone. Only frighten you, Mrs. Raisin. You were getting too close. I thought a scare might send you back to London." Agatha puffed herself up indignantly. "I do not scare. I annoy, interfere, and triumph, but I do not scare." Charles muttered, "She has a point. Fear isn't her core trait." Tamsin gave a faint, miserable smile. "I'm so tired. Living with Lionel took years from me, and killing him took the rest." Mrs. Blocksby dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "My dear, confession is the only way forward now, for the village, for your conscience." Agatha nodded firmly. "You must tell Bill, yourself, not through whispers, not through me or the vicar. Straight to him. The village deserves clarity." Tamsin stood slowly. Her shoulders were straighter than before, though her face looked pale enough to vanish into the stone around her. "Very well. I'll go now, before I lose my nerve." Mr. Blocksby rose too, flustered. "I should accompany you, offer support, pastoral comfort." "No," Agatha cut in. "She must do this alone, and you must stop cushioning everyone's worst decisions with apologies. It's done enough harm." He met her stare, and then, astonishingly, he nodded, a quiet, humbled nod. Mrs. Bloxby slipped her arm through his. "Let her walk on her own, dear. For once let someone else carry the weight." Agatha, Charles and the Bloxbys watched as Tamsin walked down the aisle, her footsteps echoing up into the rafters. She paused at the church door, took one deep breath, then pushed into the light outside, turning toward the road to Mercester. Her figure grew smaller, steadier, until she disappeared from sight. Mr. Bloxby sank into a pew. "I am so very sorry," he whispered, not to Tamsin, not to Agatha, but to the air itself, to all the mistakes he had wrapped in courtesy. Mrs. Bloxby placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Agatha felt sympathy rise, uncomfortable as a tight pair of shoes. She coughed to dispel it. "Well," she said briskly, "that's one murderer marched toward justice. I suppose Bill will be unbearably smug." Charles stretched. "He's earned it, and you've earned a stiff drink." "I've earned," Agatha said, "a village that stops blaming me for every calamity." "Unlikely," Charles replied, but charmingly optimistic. The tension cracked. Agatha allowed herself a small snort. Later, back at her cottage, she dropped her handbag onto the table with theatrical relief. Hodge trotted over, tail aloft, and inspected her ankles as if checking whether she'd finally stopped causing trouble. She scooped him up, pressing her cheek briefly to his warm fur. "There you are," she murmured, "the only male in Carsley who never complicates things." Hodge yawned, unimpressed by the compliment. The kettle let out its soft, familiar sigh. Hodge stretched and curled beside it, a small, reliable comfort in a world full of messy truths. And for the first time in days, Agatha allowed herself to exhale. "Trust Carsley to make murder look like a parish disagreement," Agatha muttered, marching past the churchyard wall as two villagers whispered behind gloved hands. She caught the words, "poor woman," and cold-blooded, proving that even tragedy couldn't unify local opinion. Half the village pitied Tamsin, the other half treated her as a cautionary tale about herbal tea. Life, however, had resumed its usual hum. The WI was already planning a bake sale, as though nothing more serious than a spilt trifle had occurred. The vicarage curtains were open again, and yet the church itself felt altered, as if the stone had absorbed too much truth to ever stand quite as serenely. Agatha told anyone who would listen that she had solved the case through sheer brilliance and attention to detail. Privately, she wasn't sure whether she felt triumphant or rueful. Tamsin's haunted confession still echoed in her mind. Desperation had worn an elegant face. She was inspecting her rose bushes, partly for effect, partly to avoid her feelings, when Bill appeared at her gate. He looked worn but relieved. "Don't tell me," Agatha said, "you've come to arrest me for meddling." Bill shook his head. "I've given up arresting you in theory. The paperwork would kill me." He stepped inside. Hodge eyed him with the suspicion of a creature who remembered every police interview ever conducted in the cottage. "I wanted to thank you," Bill said quietly. "We might never have pushed Tamsin without your persistence." "Persistence?" Agatha bridled. It was investigative finesse. "If you like." His lips twitched. "But please don't use churches as trap locations again. It complicates the risk assessments." Agatha sniffed. "You're welcome, though I suppose you'll claim the glory." Bill gave a weary smile. "No glory in this one, just sadness." He left her thoughtful, which she resented on principle. Charles arrived later in the afternoon, sweeping in as though returning from an exotic expedition rather than a leisurely drive from his manor. "Well, my dear," he declared, dropping onto her sofa, "I've decided to dine out on this story for months. The killer who used sweeteners is irresistible." Agatha scowled. "People nearly died twice, Charles. It wasn't amusing." "Everything's amusing with the right audience. Besides, you emerged radiant with triumph. Justice and vanity satisfied in one investigation." "Do shut up." "Never," he said cheerfully. He stayed long enough to steal a biscuit, complain about village parking, and promise to return once the next calamity struck. Agatha pretended not to enjoy the company. Roy phoned during supper, shrieking through the receiver. "Agatha, sweetheart, how could you let me miss all of this? A tortured widow, a poisoned benefactor, a village full of lunatics, precisely the content I need." "It wasn't content, Roy." "Oh, everything is content. I'm sending a photographer down to get moody shots of the church. Expect them tomorrow." No. Yes, Roy said, and rang off with theatrical anguish. Agatha let her head fall onto the table. Even victories were exhausting. At the vicarage, meanwhile, something quieter was unfolding. Mrs. Bloxby had invited her for tea, and Agatha accepted, partly out of curiosity, partly for the comfort only Mrs. Bloxby ever seemed to provide without boasting. The kitchen smelled of baking and calm. Mr. Bloxby sat at the table, sleeves rolled up, sorting parish notes with surprising focus. His usual smile was absent, replaced by a thoughtful stillness. "I've been reconsidering my approach," he said before Agatha could speak. "Politeness is no virtue when it hides wrongs. Lionel forced me to see that." Mrs. Bloxby poured tea with warm approval. "He's discovering boundaries," she murmured. Mr. Bloxby flushed. "I intend to support those who actually need help, not those who demand it most forcefully." Agatha, touched despite herself, gave a brisk nod. "About time. People misuse your good nature and your good stationery." He managed a shy smile. "I'm grateful for your honesty, Mrs. Raisin." "Rare thing around here," she said, stabbing a scone. "Present company accepted." They drank tea, properly strong, properly sweet, and spoke of small things. It felt like the church itself exhaled through them. As dusk fell, Agatha returned to her cottage. The moment she stepped inside, Hodge stretched luxuriously on the armchair, making it very clear he would not be shifting. "You smug little sofa thief," she said fondly, dropping her handbag. He closed his eyes, perfectly content. The house felt quiet in a way that unnerved her. Cases always filled her with a hollow restlessness once solved. Triumph was fleeting, loneliness lingered. She lit a cigarette, inhaled, and ignored Hodge's firm flick of disapproval. "Well," she muttered, "another week, another poisoned businessman. Why can't I simply enjoy early retirement? Why must I rescue vicars and unravel wills like some manic village saint?" Hodge blinked, unimpressed by her self-pity. She wandered to the window. Beyond the hedgerows, faint bells drifted from the church tower, the soft rhythm of evening practice familiar and reassuring. Whatever storms the village endured, it always settled back into itself. Agatha stubbed out the cigarette. Next mystery had better involve less cake, she warned the universe, and absolutely no vicars. Hodge stretched again, the kettle murmured into life, and Carsley, nosy, maddening beloved, carried quietly on.